You don't belong in first class. Step aside. The sentence didn't echo. It sliced, clean and precise, through the controlled noise of Gate B12 at O'Hare International Airport, where polished floors reflected overhead lights and business travelers checked their watches like synchronized clocks. Darius Cole didn't move. He stood there, boarding pass between his fingers, shoulders relaxed, posture steady, as if the words hadn't just been aimed directly at him. Around him, the line shifted in small, uncomfortable waves. A few people glanced up, then quickly backed down, the way strangers do when something feels wrong but not yet their problem. The gate agent, a woman in her mid-30s with a tight smile and sharper eyes, extended her hand again, palms slightly raised like she was directing traffic. "Sir, I said economy is that way," she added, slower this time, as if clarity would make it true. Darius tilted his head just slightly, not in confusion, but in acknowledgement. He had heard her perfectly the first time. He always did. The scanner beside her blinked faint green for a split second before she tapped something on her screen and the display shifted to red. "See?" she said, turning the monitor just enough to show it, though not enough for him to actually read anything. "Invalid." A man in a navy suit behind Darius exhaled loudly. "Come on, man. We're all trying to board," he muttered, adjusting his carry-on like impatience gave him authority. Darius didn't turn, didn't respond. His stillness wasn't passive. It was deliberate, like a weight placed in the middle of the moment that no one else could move. The agent's smile thinned. "If you could step out of the line, sir, you're holding up first-class boarding." There it was again. First class. The phrase hung in the air like a gate only some people were allowed to pass through without question. Darius slowly lifted his boarding pass again, holding it at eye level, glancing at it as if seeing it for the first time. Seat 2A. Confirmed. Paid in full. Booked under his name. His real name. No aliases. No favors. No special treatment requested. Just a seat. But seats, he had learned long ago, were never just seats. "Run it again," he said, his voice calm, low, and measured. Not a demand. Not a plea. A statement. The agent let out a small laugh, the kind that wasn't meant to be funny. "Sir, I already did." "Run it again," Darius repeated, unchanged, like he was giving her a second chance she didn't recognize as one. A young man standing off to the side, wearing a trainee badge clipped slightly crooked to his uniform, leaned forward just a fraction. His eyes flicked from Darius to the scanner. "I think I saw it go through the first time," he said quietly, almost to himself, but loud enough for the moment to catch it. The agent snapped her head toward him. "Stay in your lane," she said, voice tight. Not loud, but sharp enough to cut off anything else he might have added. He stepped back immediately, shoulders pulling in, but his eyes didn't leave Darius. A phone lifted somewhere in the line. Then another. Not obvious. Not yet. But present. The air shifted. People were paying attention now. Not because they wanted to. Because they couldn't ignore it anymore. "Sir," the agent continued, her tone flattening into something closer to procedure. "If you don't step aside, I will have to call security." The word security landed heavier than it needed to. It always did. Darius exhaled slowly, a controlled breath that seemed to steady everything around him rather than himself. He had heard that word before. Not once. Not twice. Enough times that it no longer surprised him. Just confirmed things. 23 years ago, he had stood in another airport, wearing a borrowed blazer that didn't quite fit, holding a printed ticket he had saved for months to afford. The agent back then had smiled too. Not this smile. A different one. Polite. Dismissive. "We'll need to verify this," she had said, while others walked past him without being asked anything at all. He remembered the feeling more than the words. The pause. The weight of being evaluated for something no one else had to prove. The way time stretched when you were the only one being questioned. And now, here he was again. Different airport. Different decade. Same pause. Same evaluation. Only this time, something else sat beneath it. Not frustration. Not anger. Control. The man in the navy suit behind him stepped around slightly, trying to see the screen. "If it's invalid, just move him," he said to the agent, as if Darius were a piece of luggage blocking the aisle. A woman a few spots back shook her head quietly. "That doesn't look right," she murmured, half to herself, half to the person next to her. The trainee shifted again, his voice barely above a whisper. It scanned green. This time, More people heard it. The agent's jaw tightened. She reached for the scanner again, more forcefully now, swiping the boarding pass with a quick, practiced motion. Red. She turned the screen outward for a second longer. Still invalid. But something in the way she said it felt rehearsed. Not checked. Decided. Darius didn't look at the screen. He looked at her. Not confrontational. Not aggressive. Just direct. You changed it, he said. Not loud. Not accusing. Certain. A flicker crossed her face. Small. Fast. Gone just as quickly as it appeared. Sir, that's not how this works. It is today, he replied. A few more phones lifted. Someone shifted closer, pretending to adjust their bag while angling for a better view. The trainee took a step forward before stopping himself again, caught between policy and something that felt bigger than it. The agent straightened her posture, reclaiming authority like it was a uniform she could tighten. I'm calling my supervisor. She picked up the phone beside her, pressing a button without taking her eyes off Darius. Gate B12. I need assistance. The line of passengers no longer pretended this wasn't happening. They watched openly now, some with curiosity, some with discomfort, some with recognition. Darius stood exactly where he was, not blocking the line, not stepping forward, just there, present, unmoved, the kind of presence that made people choose sides without saying a word. Seconds passed, then footsteps, measured, confident. A man in a tailored airline blazer approached from the side corridor, his expression already set before he even reached the desk. He didn't ask what happened. He looked at Darius first, then at the agent, then at the scanner. And in that order, something had already been decided. What seems to be the issue? He asked, though his tone suggested he already had an answer he preferred. Invalid boarding pass, the agent said quickly, refusing to step aside. The supervisor nodded slowly, turning his attention fully to Darius now. Sir, we're going to need you to step out of the boarding lane so we can resolve this. Resolve. Another word that meant different things depending on who said it. Darius didn't move, didn't raise his voice, didn't argue. He simply reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, the motion smooth, unhurried, like he had all the time in the world. The supervisor's eyes narrowed slightly. You can make your call once we've cleared the boarding area. Darius unlocked his screen, not looking at him. I'm making it now. The supervisor took a step closer, lowering his voice just enough to sound controlled. Sir, don't make this more complicated than it needs to be. Darius paused for a fraction of a second, then lifted his gaze, meeting the man's eyes fully for the first time. Calm, steady, unshaken. It already is. And then he tapped the screen and raised the phone to his ear as the gate, the line, the staff, and every watching passenger leaned into a moment that hadn't broken yet, but was about to. The call connected on the second ring. No hesitation. No delay. Rachel, Darius said, his voice even, as if he were confirming a calendar meeting instead of standing in the middle of a crowded boarding gate being told he did not belong. On the other end, Rachel's voice came through crisp and immediate. I am here. Around him, the supervisor shifted his weight, glancing at the line of passengers that had now slowed to a near standstill. The gate agent crossed her arms, her confidence still intact, but no longer effortless. The trainee stood off to the side, frozen between watching and wanting to speak again. Pull up flight 227, Chicago to Los Angeles. Darius continued, his eyes still locked forward, not on any one person but on the moment itself. I want real-time access to the boarding log. There was a brief pause, the soft clicking of keys on the other end, then Rachel. Again, steady and precise. Accessing now. I have the manifest. A man near the front of the line leaned slightly closer, pretending to adjust his jacket, his phone angled just enough to capture both Darius and the gate desk. A woman behind him whispered, he sounds like he owns something. The supervisor heard that. He did not like it. Sir, he said, his tone tightening. You need to step away from the gate while we resolve this. You cannot hold up boarding for a phone call. Darius did not look at him. I am not holding anything up, he replied. You are. The words landed quietly, but they shifted something. Not loud, not dramatic, just accurate. Rachel's voice returned. I see your name. Seat 2A. First class. Checked in online. Boarding pass issued. No flags. Darius nodded once, almost imperceptibly. Good. Now check the scan history. Another pause. Longer this time. The kind that carried weight. That is strange, Rachel said. The supervisor's eyes flicked toward the scanner, then back to Darius. What is strange? Darius asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. Your boarding pass scan valid at 10:14 a.m. Central Time, Rachel said. Green confirmation. But there is a manual override logged at 10:16. Status changed to invalid. A ripple moved through the line. Not loud, not chaotic, just a shift in attention, like a room leaning forward all at once. The trainee's eyes widened slightly. The gate agent's posture stiffened. Overrides happen. The supervisor cut in quickly, stepping closer. System errors, duplicate scans, security protocols. He spoke like someone used to explaining things away before they could be questioned. Darius finally turned his head, just enough to meet his gaze. Then explain why my name was removed from the active boarding list for exactly 40 seconds, Darius said, repeating Rachel's words before she even finished typing them. Rachel paused, then confirmed, that is correct. There is a 40-second gap where your record disappears completely, then reappears marked invalid. Silence did not fall. It tightened. The kind of silence that does not remove sound but compresses it, making every movement feel louder than it should. The man in the navy suit behind Darius no longer looked impatient. He looked interested. The woman who had whispered earlier now held her phone openly, no longer pretending. The trainee took a small step forward again, his voice barely above a breath. I told you it scanned green. This time, no one shut him down immediately. The supervisor's jaw set. He turned to the agent. Did you manually override this boarding pass? The question was controlled, but it was no longer rhetorical. The agent hesitated. Just a fraction of a second. But long enough. It showed invalid on my screen, she said, her voice sharper now, less composed. I followed procedure. Procedure. The word sounded different now. Less like protection, more like a shield. Darius lifted his phone slightly, not away from his ear, just enough for Rachel to hear clearly. Pull the terminal log, he said. I want to know exactly what was entered. The supervisor stepped closer again, lowering his voice, trying to regain control of a situation that was slipping in ways he could not quite define. Sir, you are escalating this unnecessarily. Darius looked at him fully now. Calm, direct, unmoved. No, he said. I am documenting it. That word landed differently. Documenting. Not arguing. Not complaining. Recording. The trainee swallowed hard, his eyes moving between the agent and the supervisor. He understood now. This was not just about a seat. Rachel's voice came back, slower this time, more deliberate. The override was entered manually, she said. Reason code, suspected ticket irregularity. A few people in the line exchanged looks. One man shook his head quietly. He showed the ticket, he said under his breath. We all saw it. The woman beside him nodded. And it scanned. The supervisor exhaled slowly, his composure tightening like a grip that was starting to strain. Sir, if there has been a mistake, we will correct it. But you need to allow us to handle this through proper channels. Darius lowered the phone just slightly, enough to speak clearly, but not enough to end the call. You already handled it, he said. That is why we are here. The agent shifted again, her confidence now visibly thinner. People try to get into first class all the time, she said, louder than necessary, as if volume could restore authority. We have to be careful. Darius did not respond immediately. He let the words sit there, in the open, where everyone could hear them. Then he asked, quietly, careful about what? No one answered right away, because the question did not need clarification. It needed honesty. And honesty, in that moment, was heavier than any policy. Rachel spoke again, her tone unchanged but carrying something sharper beneath it. Darius, I have flagged the override. I can also see prior incidents tied to this terminal. 3 similar cases in the last 60 days. All marked as ticket irregularities. All later reversed. The supervisor's eyes flicked again, this time not at the scanner but at the people watching. The phones. The attention. The shift. That is internal information, he said quickly. You should not have access to that. Darius raised the phone back to his ear fully now, his gaze steady. I have access to everything I need, he replied. The words were not loud. They did not need to be. Because now, for the first time, doubt had entered the space where certainty used to be. Not just for the staff. For everyone. The trainee took another step forward, no longer stopping himself. Sir, he said, addressing Darius directly, his voice still careful but no longer hidden. If it scanned green, you should be allowed to board. The agent turned toward him again, but this time, the reaction came slower, less sharp, because now, she was not just correcting a trainee. She was contradicting evidence. The supervisor straightened, trying to reassemble control piece by piece. "We are going to reprocess the boarding pass," he said, reaching for the scanner himself now. "That is the appropriate next step." Darius watched him, then gave a single, small nod. "Go ahead." The supervisor took the boarding pass, scanning it with a deliberate motion, as if precision could guarantee the outcome. The scanner blinked. For a split second, the green light returned. Clear. Undeniable. Then the screen flickered again. Red. The supervisor froze. Just long enough for everyone to see it. The trainee saw it. The passengers saw it. Darius saw it. And this time, there was no explanation ready fast enough to cover what everyone had just witnessed. For a split second, no one spoke. The green light had flashed. Everyone saw it. Then the red followed, like a correction that came too late to erase the truth. The supervisor's hand remained on the scanner, frozen in place, as if moving would confirm what just happened. The trainee exhaled under his breath. "It was green," he said again, this time louder, not asking for permission anymore. The words did not echo. They landed. A woman near the front lifted her phone higher. "I got that," she whispered to the man beside her. "It changed after." The man nodded slowly. "Yeah, it did." The gate agent stepped forward quickly, her voice rising just enough to reclaim space. "The system can glitch," she said. "That does not mean the ticket is valid." But even as she said it, her eyes flicked toward the supervisor, searching for reinforcement that did not come immediately. Darius did not move. He did not react to the green or the red. He had already moved past that moment. His focus was somewhere else now, somewhere deeper. "Rachel," he said quietly into the phone. "Patch in operations." There was no hesitation. "Connecting now," she replied. The supervisor finally pulled his hand back from the scanner, straightening his posture as if resetting himself would reset the situation. "We are resolving this," he said, his voice measured but tighter now. "There is no need to escalate further." Darius turned his head slightly, not enough to face him fully, just enough to acknowledge he was still there. "You keep using that word," Darius said. "Resolve." He paused for half a second. "But nothing here has been resolved." The silence that followed felt heavier than before. Not uncertain. Defined. The trainee stepped closer again, this time standing just behind the counter, his hands resting lightly on the edge as if grounding himself. He was no longer watching from the outside. He was inside the moment now. "Sir," he said to the supervisor, "we should clear him for boarding. The scan history supports it." The agent turned sharply. "You do not make that call," she snapped, but the edge in her voice had changed. It was no longer authority. It was pressure. The supervisor did not look at her. He looked at Darius, studying him now, not dismissing, not categorizing, trying to understand something he had missed. "What exactly are you doing?" he asked. It was the first honest question he had asked. Darius held the phone steady at his ear. "I am giving you time," he said. The answer did not explain anything, but it revealed everything. A new voice joined the line. Older, slower, controlled. "This is James Carter, Executive Operations. Who is requesting access?" The name alone shifted something in the air. Not everyone recognized it, but enough did. The supervisor's expression changed slightly. The agent went still. The trainee blinked, processing. Darius did not change at all. "Darius Cole," he said. No title, no explanation, just the name. There was a pause on the other end. Not long, but long enough to matter. "Understood," James replied. His tone adjusted immediately. Sharper, more alert. "What do you need?" Around the gate, people leaned in without moving. The energy pulled tighter, like everything was being drawn toward a point no one could yet see clearly. Darius spoke calmly. "I need you to pull the live terminal feed for gate B12, he said. "And I need you to listen." The supervisor's eyes narrowed. "You cannot just," he started, but stopped himself. Because now, something had shifted beyond his control. The agent looked between them, her confidence cracking in small, visible ways. "This is ridiculous," she said under her breath, but not quietly enough to go unheard. The trainee looked at her, then back at Darius, then at the supervisor. His voice came out steadier this time. "It is not ridiculous if the system shows he is right." No one shut him down. Not this time. Rachel's voice returned softly. Feed is live. James spoke again, his tone now fully engaged. I see the terminal. I see the scan log. A pause. Then, there is a manual override. The words did not surprise anyone anymore. But hearing them confirmed, in real time, by someone at that level, that changed the weight. The supervisor inhaled slowly. Overrides are part of standard protocol, he said, but now it sounded like he was explaining it to himself as much as anyone else. James did not respond to that. Instead, he asked, who authorized the override? No one at the gate answered. Because the system already had. Rachel's voice filled the gap. Override entered from terminal ID B12A, she said. Operator logged as primary gate agent. The agent's face went pale, just slightly. Enough to notice. Enough to matter. That does not mean, she began. But her voice did not finish the sentence with the same strength it started. Darius finally lowered the phone a fraction, not ending the call, just shifting it. His eyes moved across the gate. The passengers. The phones. The trainee. The supervisor. Then back to the agent. You said I did not belong in first class, he said. The words were quiet. Clear. Unrushed. The agent did not respond. Could not. Not the way she had before. The room had changed. The rules had shifted. And she felt it. The supervisor looked at her now, really looked. Not as a colleague. Not as part of the system. As the source of a problem he could no longer contain. Did you override this ticket? He asked again. This time, there was no space to hide behind procedure. No room for general answers. Just a question. Direct. The agent swallowed. I followed what I saw, she said. It was not a denial. It was not an admission. It was something in between. And everyone heard it. James spoke again, his voice now colder. We will review that, he said. Then, after a beat. For now, clear the passenger for boarding. The word should have ended it. Should have resolved everything the supervisor had been trying to control. But the moment did not release. Because Darius did not move. The trainee noticed first. Sir, he said gently, you can board now. Darius looked at him. Not at the scanner. Not at the agent. At him. I know, he said. And that was when the supervisor realized the truth. This was never about the seat. It was about what came after. Darius did not step forward. He did not reach for the boarding lane. He did not acknowledge the scanner, now quietly waiting for him to pass through. Instead, he remained exactly where he was, as if the permission to board meant nothing compared to what had already been revealed. The trainee noticed first, his brows pulling together slightly. Sir, he said again, softer this time, almost respectful, you are cleared. Darius gave a small nod, not dismissive, not grateful, just aware. I heard him, he said, referring to the voice still connected through his phone. On the other end, James Carter did not speak immediately. He understood what that pause meant. This was no longer a situation that could be closed with a simple correction. Is there anything else you need? James asked finally, his tone measured but attentive, like someone who had stepped into a moment he did not expect, but recognized the importance of immediately. Darius looked out past the gate, past the line, past the passengers who were no longer pretending to be uninvolved. Phones were no longer hidden. Eyes were no longer shifting away. Everyone was watching now, not for the resolution, but for what came next. Yes, Darius said. Keep the line open. The supervisor straightened, his controls slipping in small increments he could no longer recover. Sir, you have been cleared to board, he repeated, as if repetition could bring the situation back to something familiar. We can continue this conversation after you are seated. Darius turned his head slowly, meeting his eyes again. That is the problem, he said. You think this ends when I sit down. The words were not aggressive. They were final. The agent shifted beside him, her arms no longer crossed, her posture no longer confident. She looked at the supervisor, waiting for direction that was not coming fast enough. The trainee remained still, but his attention did not waver. He understood now that something larger than a boarding process was unfolding. Rachel's voice returned quietly through the phone. Legal has been notified, she said. Compliance is standing by. Darius nodded once. Good. The supervisor's expression tightened further. Legal, he repeated, the word landing differently now, heavier than before. This is a boarding issue, not a legal matter. Darius did not respond immediately. He let the statement sit, the same way he had let every other assumption settle into the air before it unraveled. Then he said, It stopped being a boarding issue the moment my access was changed. The trainee glanced at the screen again, as if confirming what he already knew. The green, the red, the gap, the override. It all lined up now. The agent opened her mouth, then closed it again. She had explanations before. Now she had none that fit the moment. A man near the front spoke quietly, not to anyone specific. He is right. The woman beside him nodded. This is not normal. Their voices were not loud, but they did not need to be. They were part of a shift that could no longer be ignored. James spoke again, more directly now. Darius, we can initiate a formal review immediately, he said. We can also remove the staff from duty pending investigation. The supervisor's head turned sharply at that. That is not necessary, he said quickly, stepping forward. We can handle this internally at the gate level. Darius's eyes moved back to him. Calm. Unchanged. You already handled it, he said again. The repetition did not weaken the statement. It reinforced it. The agent's breathing had changed. Slightly faster. Slightly uneven. She looked at the scanner, then at the passengers, then back at Darius. I followed what I saw, she said again, but this time it sounded smaller. Less certain. Darius did not challenge her. He did not raise his voice. He simply asked, what did you see? The question hung there. Direct. Simple. Unavoidable. The agent hesitated. The system flagged it, she said finally. Darius tilted his head slightly. The system, or you? That was when the silence deepened again. Not uncertain. Not tense. Clear. Because now, the difference mattered. The trainee looked down briefly, then back up, his voice quiet but firm. The system did not flag it until after it was scanned. No one corrected him. Not the supervisor. Not the agent. Not anyone. Because they all knew he was right. Rachel's voice came through again. Darius, I have pulled additional data, she said. There are multiple overrides tied to this terminal, all following the same pattern. The supervisor exhaled slowly, his composure now fully strained. Patterns can be misinterpreted, he said. We do not have full context. Darius nodded slightly. You are right, he said. We do not. Then he paused. Just long enough. That is why we are going to get it. The agent stepped back half a step, her confidence no longer holding. The trainee stood still, his posture straight, his eyes steady. He was no longer unsure. He was witnessing something that would stay with him long after this moment ended. James's voice returned, more decisive now. We are freezing all manual overrides at this terminal effective immediately, he said. No further changes without executive authorization. The words carried weight. Not because they were loud. Because of where they came from. The supervisor's shoulders dropped slightly, the reality settling in. This was no longer within his control. Not even close. Darius finally lowered the phone from his ear, but he did not end the call. He looked at the boarding lane again, at the path that had been denied to him just minutes ago. It was still there. Open. Unchanged. But the meaning of it had shifted completely. He stepped forward once, stopping just before the scanner. The agent moved instinctively, as if to process the boarding pass again, but hesitated. Her hand hovered, uncertain. Darius held the pass out, not forcefully, not dramatically, simply offering it. She took it, her movements slower now, more careful. She scanned it. Green. No flicker. No red. Just green. Clear. Final. The trainee exhaled softly. The passengers watched. The supervisor said nothing. Darius took the boarding pass back, looking at it for a brief second. Then he lifted his gaze, not at the scanner, not at the agent, but at the people watching. This is what it looks like when it works, he said quietly. No one responded. Not because they disagreed. Because they understood. He turned back, toward the jet bridge, taking a step forward. Then another. Not rushed. Not hesitant. Controlled. But just before he crossed the threshold, he stopped. Just long enough to look back once more. Not at the agent. Not at the supervisor. At the trainee. Their eyes met for a brief moment. And in that moment, something passed between them. Not words. Not instructions. Recognition. Then Darius turned again and walked forward, disappearing into the jet bridge, leaving behind a gate that no longer felt the same as it had just minutes before. The jet bridge swallowed the noise behind him, but it did not erase it. Darius Cole walked forward at a measured pace, the hum of the terminal fading into a quieter, narrower corridor where footsteps echoed just enough to remind you that every movement mattered. He did not look back again. He did not need to. The moment at the gate had already done what it was supposed to do. But this next phase, was never about being seen. It was about what happened when the cameras stopped feeling necessary. The flight attendant at the aircraft door smiled automatically as he approached, her posture professional, her tone warm. "Welcome aboard," she said, reaching for his boarding pass. Her eyes dropped to the name, then lifted again. A flicker. Small. Fast. Gone. But not unnoticed. Darius handed over the pass without a word. She scanned it. Green. Immediate. No delay. No hesitation. "Seat 2A, right this way," she said, stepping aside. The contrast did not need to be explained. It spoke for itself. Inside the cabin, the air was cooler, quieter, controlled in a way that suggested everything here followed a different set of expectations. First class. Wide seats. Soft lighting. Space. The kind of space that told you without saying it that not everyone was meant to be here. Darius walked down the aisle slowly, his eyes moving across the cabin. Not searching. Observing. A man in a tailored gray suit glanced up, then quickly looked back at his tablet. A woman seated by the window paused mid-sip of her drink, watching him just long enough to register something she could not yet place. The seat was exactly where it should be. 2A clean. Reserved. Waiting. Darius placed his hand lightly on the headrest, then sat down, settling into the space with the same calm control he had carried from the gate. No rush. No adjustment. Like he had always been meant to sit there. Because he had. Rachel's voice came through again, still connected. "You are on board," she said. Not a question. A confirmation. Darius leaned back slightly, his gaze forward. "Yes," he replied. There was a brief pause on the line, then James again. "We are initiating a full internal review," he said. "All override activity at that terminal is being flagged. Compliance will begin immediate interviews." Darius nodded once, though no one on the call could see it. "Do not limit it to that terminal," he said. "Expand it to all major hubs." Rachel did not hesitate. "Understood. I will include Los Angeles, Atlanta, Dallas, and New York." Darius's eyes moved slightly, taking in the cabin again, the quiet conversations, the subtle glances, the way people adjusted when they realized someone new had entered their space. "Include international as well," he added. The weight of that instruction settled immediately. This was no longer a contained issue. This was scale. James spoke again, slower now. "That will trigger a company-wide audit." Darius's response came without pause. "Good." Across the aisle, the man with the tablet looked up again, this time longer. His eyes moved from Darius to the phone in his hand, then back again. Recognition was beginning to form, not fully shaped yet, but present. The flight attendant returned, her smile still intact, but her tone slightly more careful now. "Can I offer you something to drink before departure?" she asked. Darius looked at her, his expression neutral but attentive. "Water is fine," he said. She nodded and moved away, but her glance lingered for just a fraction longer than before. Something had shifted, even here. Rachel's voice softened slightly. "Media has not picked this up yet," she said. "But there are recordings from passengers. It is only a matter of time." Darius did not react to that. "Let them," he said. "We are not managing perception." He paused briefly. "We are correcting behavior." The words were simple, direct, but they carried the kind of weight that did not need repetition. James exhaled quietly on the other end. "You are aware this will escalate quickly," he said. Darius leaned his head back slightly against the seat, his eyes forward. "It already has," he replied. The cabin door remained open. Passengers continued to board. But the rhythm had changed. Slower. More aware. Conversations were quieter, but more frequent. Eyes moved more than usual. Phones stayed out a little longer. A woman a few rows back whispered to the person beside her, her voice low but clear enough to carry. "That is him." The man beside her frowned slightly. "Who?" She did not answer immediately, because she was not completely sure yet. But she felt it. The shift. The presence. The difference between someone who belongs because they were allowed and someone who belongs because they built the system that allows others. The flight attendant returned with a glass of water, placing it gently on the tray in front of Darius. "Here you go," she said, her voice softer now. More respectful. Not because she had been told to, because she sensed something. Darius gave a small nod. "Thank you." She lingered for a brief second, then stepped away. Across the aisle, The man in the gray suit leaned slightly toward him. "Excuse me," he said, his tone polite but curious. "Were you the one at the gate just now?" Darius turned his head slightly, meeting his gaze. "I was there," he said. The man studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. "That did not look right," he said. Darius held his gaze for a second longer, then replied, "It was not." The man leaned back in his seat, processing. Not arguing. Not dismissing. Just adjusting. Rachel's voice came through again, quieter now, more focused. "Board members are requesting a briefing," she said. "They want to understand the scope before this expands further." Darius took a slow breath, his eyes moving once more across the cabin. The seats. The people. The space that had been questioned just minutes ago. "They will get one," he said. "But not yet." James responded carefully. "What is your timeline?" Darius's answer came without hesitation. "After takeoff." The words landed with intention, because this was not just about what happened on the ground. It was about what would happen next. The aircraft door closed with a soft, final sound that echoed slightly through the cabin. The boundary between outside and inside sealed. The moment at the gate was now behind them. But not over. Not even close. Darius reached for the glass of water, taking a small sip, his expression unchanged. Calm. Controlled. Focused. As if everything was proceeding exactly as expected. And in a way it was. Because for him, this was never about proving he belonged in Seat 2A. It was about proving who decided that in the first place. And now that the plane was sealed, the system that made that decision was about to answer for it. The cabin settled into a quiet rhythm as the final overhead bins clicked shut and the last few passengers found their seats. But the stillness was different now. Heavier, like something unseen had taken its place among them. Darius Cole sat unmoved in Seat 2A, his posture relaxed, his gaze steady, but nothing about him suggested rest. The aircraft had not pushed back yet, and that delay, subtle at first, began to stretch just long enough for people to notice. A flight attendant passed through the aisle with a practiced smile, but her eyes moved differently now, scanning, aware. Across the aisle, the man in the gray suit shifted in his seat, his tablet forgotten on his lap. He glanced again at Darius, then toward the front of the cabin, as if trying to confirm something he could not yet name. Rachel's voice returned through the phone, quieter now, more focused. "Operations has paused departure clearance," she said. "Ground control is waiting for confirmation from executive level." Darius did not react outwardly, but his eyes narrowed just slightly. "Good," he said. "Keep them waiting." The words were not aggressive. They were precise. On the other end, James exhaled slowly. "You are effectively holding the aircraft at the gate," he said. "This will draw attention." Darius took another small sip of water, placing the glass down with care. "It already has," he replied. The flight attendant returned again, this time slower, her voice softer. "Sir, we may have a brief delay before departure," she said. "We appreciate your patience." Darius looked up at her, his expression calm. "Take your time," he said. She nodded, but her eyes lingered for a second longer, as if she was beginning to understand that the delay was not mechanical, not logistical, but intentional. Further down the cabin, a quiet murmur began to form. Not complaints. Questions. A woman leaned toward her companion, whispering, "Why are we not moving?" The man beside her shrugged, but his attention remained fixed on the front of the plane. Phones were still out. Subtle, but present. The atmosphere had shifted from routine travel to something closer to observation. Rachel's voice cut through again. "Board members are now fully connected," she said. "They are asking for immediate context." Darius leaned back slightly, his eyes forward, his voice steady. "They will have it," he said. "Patch them in." There was a brief pause. Then multiple voices joined the line, layered, controlled, but carrying a collective urgency that had not been there before. "Darius, this is unexpected," one of them said. "We are reviewing preliminary data, but we need clarity." Darius did not rush his response. He let the silence settle just enough for the weight of the moment to register. "You have the data," he said. "Now you need to understand it." The cabin crew moved through final checks, but their movements were slightly slower, slightly more deliberate, as if they too sensed something unfolding beyond their immediate roles. The captain's voice came over the intercom, calm but measured. "Ladies and gentlemen, we appreciate your patience. We are experiencing a brief delay and we'll update you shortly. The announcement was standard. The timing was not. The man in the gray suit leaned forward again, lowering his voice. This is because of what happened at the gate, isn't it? He asked. Darius turned his head slightly, acknowledging him without fully engaging. It is because of what has been happening for a long time, he said. The answer did not satisfy curiosity. It deepened it. On the call, another board member spoke, his tone more cautious. If this is a systemic issue, we need to approach it carefully, he said. Public exposure could have significant impact. Darius's expression did not change. It already has significant impact, he replied. You are just now seeing it. Rachel added quietly. Passenger recordings are beginning to circulate internally. This will not stay contained. A pause followed. Not disagreement. Realization. The kind that does not arrive all at once, but settles piece by piece. The supervisor from the gate appeared briefly at the front of the aircraft, speaking in hushed tones with a senior crew member. His posture was no longer confident. It was controlled, but strained. He glanced once toward Darius, then quickly looked away. The shift in power was no longer subtle. It was visible. Darius watched him for a moment, then returned his attention to the call. I want full suspension of manual override privileges across all terminals, he said. The request was immediate. The implication was massive. One of the voices on the line responded carefully. That will disrupt operations nationwide. Darius did not hesitate. Then we will disrupt them, he said. The words landed with finality. Not dramatic. Not raised. Just decided. The cabin felt quieter after that, as if even the ambient noise had lowered itself to listen. The flight attendant paused near the galley, speaking softly into a handset, her eyes flicking toward first class again. Information was moving. Fast. Rachel's voice returned. Compliance teams are being activated, she said. Regional directors are requesting instruction. Darius's gaze moved once more across the cabin. The people, the space that had nearly rejected him minutes earlier. Tell them to wait, he said. We are not reacting. We are resetting. The distinction mattered, and everyone on the line felt it. The captain's voice came again, this time slightly different. We are currently awaiting final clearance. Thank you for your continued patience. No estimated time. No explanation. Just waiting. The passengers shifted again, but not in frustration. In awareness. Something was happening. They did not know exactly what, but they knew it was not normal. The man across the aisle sat back slowly, his expression thoughtful now. You are not just a passenger, are you? He said quietly. Darius met his gaze for a brief moment. Not today, he replied. The answer was simple, but it carried everything. On the call, James spoke again, his tone now aligned with Darius's. We are ready to proceed with your directive, he said. Say the word. Darius leaned forward slightly, his hands resting calmly on the armrests, his posture unchanged, but his presence unmistakable. He looked out toward the closed cabin door, the sealed boundary between what had happened and what was about to happen next. Then he spoke, his voice steady, controlled, and final. Begin. And in that single word, the system that had quietly decided who belonged was about to be forced to answer for every decision it had ever made. The word hung in the air long after Darius spoke it. Begin. It did not echo through the cabin, but it moved through the system, fast, precise, invisible to most but undeniable in its effect. Rachel was the first to respond. Directive initiated, she said, her voice steady, already in motion. Override privileges suspended across all active terminals. Compliance teams deployed. On the other end, multiple confirmations followed in rapid succession, voices layering over each other, each one carrying the same shift in tone. Not questioning anymore. Executing. Inside the cabin, nothing had changed physically. The seats were the same. The lights were the same. The passengers remained seated. But the atmosphere had tightened, as if something just beneath the surface had locked into place. The captain's voice came again over the intercom, this time slower, more deliberate. Ladies and gentlemen, we are currently coordinating with operations. We will update you shortly. The message was calm, but the cadence had changed. Across the aisle, the man in the gray suit sat completely still now, his earlier curiosity replaced with something closer to awareness. He was no longer observing a situation. He was witnessing a shift. A woman further back leaned forward, her voice barely above a whisper. This is not a delay, she said. Something is happening. And she was right. At the front of the aircraft, two senior crew members stood near the galley, speaking in low tones, their posture more rigid than before. One of them glanced down at a handheld device, her expression tightening slightly as new information came through. She looked toward first class, then quickly back to the screen. Rachel's voice continued, efficient and controlled. Regional systems are responding. Los Angeles hub has already flagged 7 override cases within the last hour. Atlanta is reporting similar patterns. Darius did not move. He did not react outwardly, but his eyes sharpened just slightly, focusing not on the numbers, but on what they represented. Document everything, he said. No summaries. Full records. Understood, Rachel replied immediately. On the call, one of the board members spoke again, his tone now fully aligned with the shift that had taken hold. This is larger than we anticipated, he said. If this pattern holds across multiple hubs, we are looking at a systemic exposure. Darius leaned back slightly in his seat, his hands resting calmly, his posture unchanged. You are not looking at exposure, he said. You are looking at confirmation. The distinction landed with weight. Not dramatic, not loud, just undeniable. The supervisor from the gate appeared again briefly near the aircraft entrance, this time accompanied by another airline official, someone higher in rank, their conversation hushed but urgent. The supervisor's earlier confidence was gone completely now, replaced by something closer to containment. He glanced once more toward Darius, but this time there was no attempt to assert control, only recognition. Inside the cabin, the flight attendants moved more carefully now, their routines intact, but their awareness heightened. One of them paused near the front row, her voice softer than before. We appreciate your continued patience, she said to no one in particular, but her eyes flicked toward Darius for just a fraction longer than necessary. She did not know exactly who he was, but she knew enough to understand that this moment was not ordinary. Rachel's voice returned again, carrying new information. Media monitoring has detected early uploads, she said. Passenger recordings are beginning to circulate. No major coverage yet, but it is building. Darius nodded once, his gaze steady. Let it build, he said. We are not hiding this. On the call, another voice responded, more cautious. Public exposure will accelerate scrutiny, he said. We need to control the narrative. Darius turned his head slightly, his expression calm but firm. There is no narrative to control, he said. There is only what happened. The words settled into the line, silencing any immediate response. Because they were not defensive. They were factual, and facts, in that moment, carried more weight than strategy. The man across the aisle leaned forward again, his voice lower now, more careful. You just stopped a plane from leaving, he said quietly. It was not an accusation. It was an observation. Darius met his gaze briefly. No, he replied. I stopped something else. The answer did not explain, but it shifted understanding. Further down the cabin, a young woman adjusted her phone, her screen angled slightly toward the aisle, recording without making it obvious. Her expression was focused, not on capturing drama, but on documenting something she knew mattered. The atmosphere in the cabin had moved beyond curiosity. It had become awareness. Rachel spoke again, her voice steady but carrying a new layer of urgency. Compliance is requesting authorization to suspend involved personnel at Gate B12 immediately, she said. They are awaiting confirmation. Darius did not hesitate. Approved, he said. The decision moved instantly through the system. No delay. No reconsideration. The supervisor at the front of the aircraft received the notification at nearly the same moment, his posture shifting as he read it. He turned to the official beside him, speaking quickly, his voice low but urgent. The official nodded once, then stepped away, already moving to execute. The ripple effect was no longer contained. It was spreading. On the call, James spoke again, his tone now fully aligned with execution. All terminals are reporting in, he said. Override suspension is active system-wide. We are seeing immediate impact. Darius's gaze moved once more across the cabin. The people, the space that had nearly denied him minutes earlier. Good, he said quietly. The captain's voice came over the intercom again, this time different. More direct. Ladies and gentlemen, we are currently awaiting final operational clearance. We appreciate your patience as we complete this process. No estimated time. No routine phrasing. Just acknowledgement. The passengers did not complain. They did not question loudly. They watched. They waited. Because now, they understood that whatever was happening was not random. It was intentional. The man in the gray suit leaned back slowly, his expression no longer curious, but reflective. "I have never seen anything like this," he said under his breath. Darius did not respond. He did not need to, because this was not something meant to be seen often. This was what happened when a system that had operated quietly for too long was forced into the light. Rachel's voice returned one more time, steady, precise, fully engaged. "All directives are in motion," she said. "We are ready for your next instruction." Darius sat still for a moment, the weight of everything settling into place exactly where it needed to be. Then he spoke, his voice calm, controlled, and final. "Now we make sure it never happens again." And in that moment, the delay was no longer a delay. It was a turning point. The cabin did not move, but everything inside it had already shifted. Darius Cole sat still in seat 2A, his presence no longer just observed, but understood in fragments by those around him. Not fully, not completely, but enough to change the way they looked at him, the way they listened when he spoke, the way they stayed quiet when he did not. The silence in the aircraft was no longer passive. It was active, watching, waiting. Rachel's voice returned, steady but carrying a new layer of depth. "We are receiving confirmations from all major hubs," she said. "Override suspensions are holding. No further manual changes allowed without executive clearance." Darius nodded once, his gaze fixed ahead, his posture unchanged. "Good," he said. "Now pull the audit trail for the last 90 days. There was no hesitation. "Compiling now," Rachel replied. On the line, one of the board members exhaled slowly, the weight of the request settling in. 90 days will expose patterns across multiple departments," he said. "This will not stay contained to frontline staff." Darius's voice remained calm. It was never just frontline staff. The distinction landed heavier than anything before it. Because now, the scope was no longer theoretical. It was structural. Across the cabin, the man in the gray suit leaned back, his earlier curiosity now replaced with something closer to realization. He was no longer trying to figure out what was happening. He was starting to understand what it meant. A woman 2 rows behind adjusted her seat slightly, her eyes fixed forward but her attention clearly elsewhere. "This is bigger than the gate," she whispered softly. The person beside her nodded without looking up. They both knew it. Everyone was beginning to. At the front of the aircraft, the senior crew member who had been speaking earlier stepped into the aisle, her expression composed but her movements more deliberate. She glanced once toward first class, then continued forward, her focus shifting between her device and the cabin. Information was moving quickly now, but it was no longer chaotic. It was organized, directed. Rachel's voice came through again. "Initial audit sample is ready," she said. "There are repeated override entries tied to specific time windows and passenger profiles." She paused briefly, as if choosing her next words carefully. "The patterns are consistent." Darius did not respond immediately. He let the silence carry the weight of that statement. Because consistency meant intent, and intent meant accountability. On the call, another voice spoke, lower, more measured. "If these patterns are confirmed, we are looking at exposure that reaches beyond operational error," he said. "This becomes policy failure." Darius's eyes moved slightly, scanning the cabin again, the quiet, the awareness, the shift that had already taken hold. "Call it what it is," he said. "It is not failure. It is permission." The word landed differently, sharper, more precise, because failure could be accidental. Permission was not. The man across the aisle exhaled slowly, his fingers tapping lightly against the armrest as he processed what he was hearing. He did not interrupt. He did not question. He listened. Further down the cabin, a passenger adjusted her phone again, her recording steady now, not hidden anymore. She was not capturing a moment. She was documenting a shift. Rachel continued, her voice steady. "We are identifying clusters of activity tied to specific terminals and personnel groups," she said. This was not isolated. Darius leaned forward slightly, his hands resting calmly on his knees. "Then do not treat it like it was," he said. On the other end, James responded, his tone fully aligned now. "We are preparing a company-wide directive," he said. "Immediate suspension of all discretionary overrides pending full review." Darius nodded once. "Send it," he said. The instruction moved instantly. No delay, no debate. Across the system, changes were being executed in real time. Inside the aircraft, the effect was subtle but present. The crew moved with greater awareness. Conversations remained quiet, but more focused. The atmosphere was no longer uncertain. It was defined. The captain's voice came over the intercom again, this time with a different weight. Ladies and gentlemen, we are finalizing operational clearance. Thank you for your continued patience. The message was still calm, but now it carried something else. Resolution. Not the kind that ends a delay. The kind that marks a shift. The supervisor who had been at the gate was no longer visible. The official who had accompanied him had stepped away entirely. Whatever was happening beyond the cabin doors was no longer being managed at the local level. It had moved beyond that. The man in the gray suit spoke again, his voice lower now, more thoughtful. You said this has been happening for a long time, he said. How long? Darius turned his head slightly, meeting his gaze for a brief moment. Long enough that people stopped questioning it, he replied. The answer did not give a number. It gave something more important. Context. The man nodded slowly, leaning back again, his expression no longer curious but reflective. He understood enough now. Rachel's voice returned once more, carrying final confirmation. The directive has been issued, she said. All override privileges are suspended system-wide. Compliance audits are active across every hub. Darius sat back again, his posture unchanged, his presence steady. Good, he said. The word was simple, but it carried completion, not of the process, of the beginning of it. The cabin remained still for another moment, the quiet stretching just long enough for everyone to feel it. Then, finally, a subtle shift. The low hum of the aircraft adjusted. The slight movement beneath the floor signaled preparation. The boundary between delay and departure had been crossed, but the moment itself did not fade. It remained, in the awareness of the passengers, in the posture of the crew, in the system that had just been forced to look at itself. Darius reached for his glass of water again, taking a slow sip, his eyes forward, his expression unchanged. Calm, controlled, certain, because this was never about the seat. It was about the system that decided who deserved one. And now, for the first time in a long time, that system was no longer invisible. The aircraft began to move, not with urgency, but with a slow, deliberate roll that signaled the transition from pause to motion, from question to consequence. The cabin shifted almost imperceptibly as the wheels turned beneath them, and yet the energy inside did not follow the same path. It remained fixed, anchored to something that had already changed. Darius Cole sat still, his gaze forward, his posture unchanged, as if the movement of the plane had nothing to do with him. And in a way, it did not. Because what had started at Gate B12 was no longer confined to this aircraft. It had already spread beyond it. Rachel's voice came through again, quieter now, more measured, but carrying the kind of clarity that comes after action has been set in motion. All hubs have confirmed compliance, she said. Override suspensions are active. No exceptions. Darius nodded once, his eyes steady. Keep monitoring, he replied. On the other end, James spoke again, his tone no longer cautious, but aligned, committed. We are receiving reports from regional directors, he said. Several are requesting immediate guidance. They are seeing disruptions at the gate level. Darius leaned back slightly, the faint hum of the engines building beneath his seat. They should be, he said. That is what happens when you remove something people relied on without questioning. The words were not critical. They were observational. Across the aisle, the man in the gray suit watched him more openly now, no longer trying to hide his attention. You just changed something mid-flight, he said quietly. Darius turned his head just enough to meet his gaze. No, he replied. It was already changing. I just made it visible. The distinction settled into the space between them. The man nodded slowly, understanding more than he had before. The plane continued its slow taxi, the cabin lights steady, the environment controlled. But beneath that surface, something else was unfolding. Rachel's voice returned, sharper now. We have our first escalation, she said. Los Angeles Hub reports a senior manager attempting to override the suspension manually. The system blocked it. Darius's expression did not change, but his focus sharpened. Flag it, he said. Name and timestamp. Already done, Rachel replied. On the call, another voice joined, urgent but contained. We are seeing resistance, he said. Some staff are questioning the directive. They are saying it will slow operations. Darius let a brief silence pass before responding. Then let it slow, he said. Speed was never the problem. The weight of that statement moved through the line, through the system, through every layer that had operated under a different assumption just hours before. In the cabin, a flight attendant moved down the aisle, her steps measured, her attention divided between routine duties and the subtle awareness that something larger was taking place. She paused briefly near Darius, not to speak, but to observe, her expression composed but thoughtful. She understood now that the delay, the movement, the tension, none of it had been random. Further back, a passenger leaned toward another, his voice low. This is going to be everywhere by tonight, he said. The other nodded. It should be, she replied. There. Words did not carry far, but they did not need to. They reflected what others were already thinking. Rachel spoke again, her tone steady but carrying new data. Preliminary audit is expanding, she said. We are identifying clusters not just by location, but by time of day and passenger profile. The patterns are more defined than we expected. Darius's eyes moved slightly, not in surprise, but in confirmation. Send it to legal, he said. Full documentation. Understood, Rachel replied. On the call, James added, legal is preparing a framework for internal accountability. They are asking how far you want this to go. The question hung for a moment, not because it was unclear, but because it required a decision that would define everything that followed. Darius did not hesitate. As far as it needs to, he said. The answer was simple, but it carried no limit. The engines grew louder as the plane approached the runway, the subtle vibration beneath the cabin becoming more noticeable. The transition from ground to air was close now, but the real shift had already happened. The man in the gray suit leaned back again, his expression thoughtful. Most people would have just taken the seat and moved on, he said. Darius looked forward, his voice calm. Most people are not in a position to change what happens next, he replied. The man nodded slowly, accepting the truth in that. Rachel's voice came through again, more urgent now. We have confirmation, she said. The incident at the gate has reached external media. Initial coverage is beginning. Darius did not react outwardly. Let it run, he said. We will respond with action, not statements. On the call, one of the board members spoke again, his tone now fully aligned with execution. We will need a formal address, he said. This will require leadership visibility. Darius's gaze remained steady. They will have it, he said, after we land. The timing was intentional, because what happened in the air would not be visible, but what happened after would be undeniable. The plane reached the runway, pausing briefly, the engines building to a low, powerful hum that filled the cabin without overwhelming it. A moment of stillness before acceleration, a moment where everything aligned. Rachel spoke one more time, her voice steady, precise. All systems are aligned with your directive, she said. There are no active overrides. The network is clean. Darius closed his eyes for a brief second, not in rest, but in acknowledgement. Then he opened them again, his gaze forward, his presence unchanged. Good, he said quietly. The engines surged, the aircraft accelerating down the runway, the force pressing gently against the seats as the ground beneath them blurred into motion. And as the plane lifted, leaving the runway behind, the system that had once quietly decided who belonged was no longer operating in the shadows. It had been pulled into the light, and there was no going back. The aircraft climbed steadily, the city shrinking beneath it, lights and structures dissolving into patterns that no longer held individual meaning. And yet inside the cabin, every detail felt sharper, more defined, as if altitude had stripped away distraction and left only clarity behind. Darius Cole sat unmoved, his posture relaxed but precise, his presence unchanged as the plane leveled into its ascent, the soft hum of the engines now a constant beneath everything else. Around him, the cabin settled into what should have been routine, seat belts fastened, tray tables upright, eyes forward, but nothing about this moment felt routine anymore. Rachel's voice came through again, steady but carrying a new intensity. External coverage has accelerated, she said. Major outlets are picking up the story. The footage from the gate is now public. Darius did not react outwardly. He did not need to. Track sentiment, he said. not just headlines. Understood, Rachel replied immediately. On the call, James added, his tone controlled but aware of the scale unfolding. We are receiving inquiries from investors, he said. They are asking about operational stability. Darius leaned back slightly, his gaze forward, his voice even. Tell them the system is stabilizing for the first time, he said. The words did not defend. They reframed. Across the aisle, the man in the gray suit watched him carefully, no longer curious, no longer uncertain. He was listening now, fully. You knew this would happen, he said quietly. Darius turned his head just enough to acknowledge him. I knew it needed to, he replied. The distinction settled again, quiet but heavy. The cabin lights dimmed slightly as the aircraft reached cruising altitude, a subtle shift that usually signaled rest, routine, calm. But this time, it felt different. Not calm. Controlled. Rachel's voice returned, sharper now. We have confirmation of internal escalation, she said. 2 regional directors have attempted to issue counter-directives. Both were blocked by the system. Darius's eyes narrowed slightly, not in surprise, but in recognition. Log it, he said. Names, timestamps, intent. Already documented, Rachel replied. On the line, another board member spoke, his tone more urgent now. This is creating internal resistance, he said. Some are saying this level of enforcement is excessive. Darius let a brief silence pass before answering. Excessive compared to what? He asked. No one answered immediately, because the question did not need clarification. It needed accountability. The man across the aisle exhaled slowly, his voice lower now. People do not like change when it exposes something, he said. Darius looked forward again. That is not the problem, he replied. The problem is when they were comfortable with it before. The weight of that statement settled into the space, into the call, into the cabin itself. Further down the aisle, a flight attendant paused briefly, her attention drawn not by noise, but by presence. She looked toward Darius, then away, her expression thoughtful. She did not know the details, but she understood the shift. Rachel continued, her voice steady but carrying more data. We are seeing a measurable drop in override attempts, she said. The system is holding. Compliance teams are reporting increased cooperation at the gate level. Darius nodded once. Good, he said. Now track behavior, not just activity. Clarify, Rachel responded. I want to know how people are responding when they cannot override, Darius said. Not just that they cannot. There was a brief pause, then Rachel replied, understood. Behavioral metrics will be included. On the call, James spoke again, his tone now fully aligned with execution. Legal has drafted initial accountability protocols, he said. They are requesting your approval before distribution. Darius did not hesitate. Send them, he said. No delays. The instruction moved instantly. No hesitation. No revision. The system continued to adjust, layer by layer, decision by decision. The man in the gray suit leaned back slightly, his expression thoughtful. You are not just fixing what happened, he said. Darius glanced at him briefly. No, he replied. I am making sure it cannot repeat. The answer was simple, but it carried finality. Rachel's voice returned again, carrying a new update. We have identified a pattern in passenger complaints that were previously dismissed, she said. Several matched the same override behavior. Darius's focus sharpened. Reopen them, he said. All of them. That will trigger direct outreach, Rachel noted. Then we reach out, Darius replied. The decision was immediate. The implication was clear. This was not just correction. It was accountability. On the call, one of the board members spoke again, his tone now more measured, more aligned. This will set a precedent, he said, for how we handle issues like this moving forward. Darius's gaze remained steady. That is the point, he said. The cabin remained quiet, but the awareness within it had deepened. Passengers were no longer just observing. They were processing, understanding, adjusting. The captain's voice came over the intercom again, calm and steady. We have reached cruising altitude. You are now free to move about the cabin. The announcement was routine, but the moment was not. No one moved immediately, because the real movement had already happened. Rachel spoke once more, her voice steady, precise, fully aligned. All systems are operating under the new directive, she said. There are no active override channels. The network is fully compliant. Darius sat still for a moment, letting the weight of that settle. Then he nodded once. Good, he said quietly. The word carried completion, not of the process, but of the shift. He reached for his glass again, taking a slow sip, his gaze forward, his expression unchanged. Calm, controlled, certain, because this was never about proving he belonged in that seat. It was about proving that no one should have to prove it in the first place. And now, thousands of feet above the ground, the system that once decided silently had been forced to answer out loud. At cruising altitude, the cabin finally allowed movement, but the stillness around Darius Cole remained intact, untouched by the soft clink of glasses or the quiet shuffle of passengers unbuckling their seat belts. The system had shifted, but the consequences were still unfolding, and everyone, whether they understood it fully or not, could feel that something irreversible had taken place. Darius sat with the same composed posture, his hands resting lightly, his eyes forward, not scanning, not reacting, but fully aware of everything happening around him and far beyond the aircraft itself. Rachel's voice came through again, no longer just reporting, but coordinating. "We are seeing the second wave," she said. "Internal communications are changing tone. Departments that were defensive earlier are now requesting alignment." Darius nodded once, slow and deliberate. "Send them the directive again," he said. "Not as instruction, as expectation." There was a brief pause. Then Rachel responded, "Understood." Reframing now. On the line, James spoke, his tone steady but carrying the weight of rapid transformation. "We are receiving compliance confirmations from hubs that previously resisted," he said. "There is a clear shift in response behavior." Darius leaned back slightly, his gaze steady. "That is what happens when resistance no longer works," he said. Across the aisle, the man in the gray suit watched him closely, his expression thoughtful, almost analytical now. "You did not force them," he said quietly. Darius turned his head slightly, acknowledging him. "No," he replied. "I removed their options." The difference settled into the air between them. It was not about pressure. It was about structure. Further down the cabin, a flight attendant moved with quiet precision, offering drinks, checking in with passengers, but her attention flickered more than usual, her awareness tuned to something beyond routine service. She glanced once more toward Darius, not out of curiosity, but recognition. Something had changed in the way the space itself functioned. Rachel's voice returned again, carrying new information. "We have completed cross-reference analysis on prior complaints," she said. "There are multiple cases where passengers were denied access under similar override conditions. Several of those individuals have already been identified." Darius's focus sharpened slightly. "Reach out to them," he said. "Directly. No automated responses." "That will require immediate coordination across customer relations," Rachel noted. "Then coordinate," Darius replied. The instruction was simple, but it carried a clear message. This was not about managing fallout. It was about correcting what had been ignored. On the call, one of the board members spoke, his tone now fully aligned with execution rather than caution. "This will redefine how frontline decisions are evaluated," he said. "There will be no room for discretionary interpretation at that level anymore." Darius's gaze remained steady. "There should never have been," he said. The cabin remained quiet, but the awareness within it deepened further. Conversations that had been whispers earlier were now replaced with silence, not because people had lost interest, but because they were processing something larger than a single moment. The man in the gray suit leaned forward slightly, his voice lower now. "You said earlier this was about what happens next," he said. "What happens next?" Darius looked at him briefly, his expression calm but firm. "Now it becomes policy," he said. The answer was direct, not speculative, not conditional. Final. Rachel's voice came through again, more focused than before. "Legal has finalized the accountability framework," she said. "It includes mandatory review of all override activity, disciplinary measures tied to intent, and a new verification protocol that removes individual discretion." Darius nodded once. "Send it to every regional director," he said, "and require acknowledgement." "Already in progress," Rachel replied. On the call, James added, "We are also preparing a public statement," he said. "There is increasing pressure for transparency." Darius paused for a brief moment, not in hesitation, but in precision. "No statement yet," he said. "Action first." The words carried weight, because they defined the order of things. Not reaction, resolution. Across the cabin, the subtle hum of movement continued, but no one moved casually. Even the smallest actions felt intentional, measured, aware. A passenger further back adjusted her phone again, her recording steady, her expression focused. She was no longer capturing an incident. She was documenting a shift. Rachel continued, her voice steady. "We are seeing early signs of behavioral adjustment at the gate level," she said. "Staff are following protocol without deviation. No override attempts since suspension." Darius leaned forward slightly, his hands resting calmly. "Monitor consistency," he said. "Not just compliance." "Understood," Rachel replied. On the call, another voice spoke, more reflective now. "This is going to change how authority is exercised across the entire organization," he said. "There will be less room for interpretation." Darius's gaze moved slightly, taking in the cabin once more. "There will be less room for bias," he said. The correction was subtle, but important. The man in the gray suit nodded slowly, his expression now fully settled into understanding. "You did not just fix a problem," he said. Darius looked forward again. "No," he replied. "I exposed it." The distinction mattered, because exposure changes everything. Rachel's voice returned once more, carrying final confirmation for this phase. "All systems are stable under the new framework," she said. "No active resistance. Full compliance across all monitored hubs." Darius sat still for a moment, letting the weight of that settle. Then he nodded once. "Good," he said quietly. The word carried completion, not of the entire process, but of the turning point. He reached for his glass again, taking a slow sip, his expression unchanged, his presence steady. Because this was never about one gate, one seat, or one moment. It was about a system that had quietly decided who belonged and who did not. And now, thousands of feet above the ground, that system was no longer deciding in silence. It was being held accountable in real time. The cabin had settled into a quiet rhythm, but it was no longer the kind of quiet that came from routine. It was the kind that followed realization, when people understood they had just witnessed something that would not simply fade into the background. Darius Cole remained in seat 2A, still composed, still controlled, his presence unchanged, but the effect of what he had set in motion continued to ripple outward in ways that could not be reversed. Rachel's voice returned, steady, focused, but carrying a new layer of finality. "All regional acknowledgments have been received," she said. "Every director has signed off on the new compliance framework. No exceptions." Darius nodded once, his gaze forward. "Good," he said. "Now verify implementation, not just agreement." There was a brief pause as Rachel processed the instruction. "Understood," she replied. "We will confirm execution at the operational level." On the call, James spoke again, his tone measured, but now carrying a sense of closure that had not been there before. "We have initiated personnel reviews tied to override activity," he said. "Preliminary findings show clear patterns of discretionary misuse." Darius leaned back slightly, his expression unchanged. "Then do not treat it as misuse," he said. "Treat it as decision-making." The distinction shifted the weight of responsibility. Misuse could be corrected. Decisions required accountability. Across the aisle, the man in the gray suit listened carefully, his earlier curiosity now replaced with a deeper understanding. "You are not just correcting behavior," he said quietly. "You are redefining responsibility." Darius turned his head slightly, acknowledging him. "Responsibility was always there," he replied. "It just was not enforced." The words settled into the space, quiet but firm. Further down the cabin, the flight attendants moved with renewed clarity, their actions precise, their interactions consistent, as if the entire environment had adjusted to a new standard without needing to be told directly. A passenger near the window looked out at the clouds below, then back toward the cabin, her expression thoughtful. "Everything feels different," she whispered. The person beside her nodded. "Because it is," he replied. Rachel's voice came through again, carrying new confirmation. "Customer relations has begun direct outreach to affected passengers," she said. "Initial responses indicate strong acknowledgement of past issues." Darius's focus sharpened slightly. "Make sure it is not just acknowledgement," he said. "Make sure it is correction." "Yes," Rachel replied immediately. On the call, another board member spoke, his tone now fully aligned with the new direction. "We are preparing long-term policy integration," he said. This will be embedded into training, evaluation, and system design. Darius nodded once. Then build it into the system, he said. Not just the people. The statement carried a deeper layer of meaning. Because systems do not forget. People do. The man in the gray suit leaned back slowly, his voice lower now. Most companies would issue an apology and move on, he said. Darius looked forward, his expression calm. That is why it keeps happening, he replied. The simplicity of the answer left no room for argument. Rachel's voice returned again, steady but now carrying a sense of completion. All override channels remain inactive, she said. Behavioral monitoring shows consistent adherence to protocol across all hubs. Darius sat still for a moment, letting the information settle. Then he nodded once. Maintain it, he said. Consistency is what makes it real. On the call, James added, We are preparing for your arrival, he said. Executive staff and media will be waiting. Darius's gaze remained steady. They can wait, he said. This is not about optics. The words carried clarity. Because what had happened was not meant to be displayed. It was meant to be sustained. The cabin remained quiet, but the awareness within it had reached a new level. Passengers were no longer just processing what had happened. They were understanding what it meant. A shift not just in a moment, but in a system. Rachel spoke again, her tone precise. Final audit reports will be ready within 24 hours, she said. We will have full visibility across all operations. Darius nodded slightly. Good, he said. And make sure nothing is filtered. It will not be, Rachel replied. The commitment was clear. Transparency was no longer optional. The man across the aisle glanced toward the window, then back at Darius. You changed something that most people never even see, he said. Darius looked at him briefly. That is why it lasted so long, he replied. The truth in that statement settled heavily. Because what is unseen is rarely challenged. Rachel's voice came through one final time in this phase, steady, grounded. All systems are aligned, she said. There are no active deviations. The network is stable under the new framework. Darius sat still, his posture unchanged, his presence steady. Then he nodded once. Good, he said quietly. The word marked a transition, not an ending, a foundation. He reached for his glass again, taking a slow sip, his gaze forward, his expression calm and certain. Because this was never about a single incident. It was about what that incident revealed. And now, thousands of feet above the ground, with every system aligned and every layer exposed, the structure that once allowed quiet decisions to go unchecked had been replaced with something else. Something visible, something accountable, something that no longer depended on who was standing at the gate, but on what the system itself would allow. And for the first time, that system had been rewritten in real time. The aircraft continued its steady course through the sky, miles above the ground where everything had started, but the altitude had not distanced the moment. It had clarified it. Inside the cabin, the atmosphere no longer carried tension. It carried understanding. Not everyone could explain it, but everyone could feel it. Something had been corrected, not just for one person, not just for one flight, but for something far deeper that had existed quietly for far too long. Darius Cole remained in seat 2A, composed, still. His presence unchanged from the moment he first stepped into the boarding line. But now, there was no question around him. No uncertainty, only recognition. Rachel's voice came through one more time, steady and grounded, no longer urgent, no longer reactive. All systems remain stable, she said. There are no override attempts. Compliance is holding across every region. Darius nodded once, his gaze forward, his posture relaxed but precise. Maintain it, he said. Do not let it drift. We will not, Rachel replied. The certainty in her voice matched his. On the call, James spoke again, but this time, his tone was different. Not focused on execution, not concerned with escalation. Reflective. This will be remembered, he said. Not just internally. Darius did not respond immediately. He let the words settle, not because they needed confirmation, but because they needed context. Then he said, It should be. Across the aisle, the man in the gray suit leaned back slowly, his expression calm now, no longer searching for answers. He had found enough of them. You did not raise your voice once, he said quietly. Darius turned his head slightly, acknowledging him. I did not need to, he replied. The simplicity of the statement carried more weight than anything else. Because power, Real power did not require volume. It required clarity. Further down the cabin, the flight attendants moved with ease now, their interactions smooth, consistent, unforced. The environment had returned to something that looked like normal. But it was not the same normal. It was something better defined. A passenger near the window looked out at the horizon, then back toward the cabin, her voice soft. "It feels different," she said again. The person beside her nodded. "Because now it is," he replied. The difference was no longer subtle. It was understood. Rachel's voice returned briefly, carrying the final confirmation. "All directives are fully integrated," she said. "There are no remaining gaps in the system." Darius sat still for a moment, letting that settle. Then he nodded once. "Good," he said. The word marked completion, not just of the action, of the correction. On the call, one of the board members spoke, his tone measured but certain. "We are aligned on the long-term implementation," he said. "This will be permanent." Darius's gaze remained steady. "Then it will matter," he said. "Because temporary change does not shift systems. Only permanence does." The cabin remained quiet, but no longer heavy. The weight had lifted, replaced by something clearer, something stable. The man in the gray suit glanced toward the window, then back at Darius. "Most people would have just taken the seat," he said, and said nothing. Darius looked forward, his voice calm. "That is how it keeps happening," he replied. The truth in that statement did not need emphasis. It spoke for itself. Rachel's voice came through one final time, softer now, almost closing the loop. "Everything is in place," she said. "There is nothing left unaddressed." Darius took a slow breath, not as relief, but as acknowledgement. "Good," he said again. The repetition was not redundant. It was final. The aircraft continued forward, steady, controlled, the destination ahead clear, the path unchanged. But what had happened inside that cabin would not stay there. It would move with the system, through every terminal, every gate, every decision that followed. Darius reached for his glass one last time, taking a measured sip, his eyes forward, his expression calm and certain. Then he set it down, his hand resting lightly on the armrest, his posture unchanged. And after a moment, he spoke, not into the phone, not to the board, but quietly, just enough for the space around him to carry it. "You did not deny me a seat," he said. "You revealed your system." The words did not echo. They did not need to, because everyone who had witnessed the moment already understood. And as the aircraft moved forward, miles above the ground, one thing had become undeniable. Respect was never supposed to be granted based on appearance. It was supposed to be assumed. And now, for the first time in a long time, it was.